Thanks for stopping by the Art Box, guys. Today we have a new glass painting video. Today we're going to be painting a lean, mean green fighting machine. And no, I'm not talking about a Ninja Turtle. I'm talking about the one and only She-Hulk. And why does everybody seem to hate her? I'm a few episodes into the new She-Hulk Attorney at Law series that's on Disney Plus right now, and I am really enjoying this show. I am not sure why everybody is such in an uproar about this character. To be quite honest, I've only seen She-Hulk in passing. I saw her in a few cartoons that came out in the 90s, and she's been in a couple of video games that I've played, but I've never sat down and actually read a She-Hulk comic book. But just from those little introductions, I can tell this is not a character that you're supposed to take seriously because it doesn't seem like she takes anything seriously. She-Hulk is exactly what you would get if you would take Rogue from the X-Men, who is very, very powerful and does not hold back with her flirtatious nature, which is why she's one of my favorite X-Men.
Tad chilly in here, don't you think?
And cross her with the comedy you get from Deadpool. Interestingly enough, though, she actually came out first in 1980, debuting in issue number 1 of the Savage Hulk. Later, in the Sensational Hulk number 1 in 1989, that's when we get introduced to more of her comic side, where she starts breaking the fourth wall, you know, looking at the camera screen and acknowledging that she's actually a fictional character drawn in a comic book. This has been made more popular and maybe more well known with Deadpool, who actually came out in 1991, believe it or not.
Whatever you say, Ponytail. Strike a pose.
But it's just funny to me that every episode that has come out so far, the toxic fanboys, as everybody calls them, has an issue with what's going on in this show. I really feel like we've come to an era in media in general where we just can't enjoy anything for what it was. It has to be scrutinized and ripped apart, which is very, very sad, because I remember back in 96 reading the Wizard comic book when they were fan casting all these movies, and we were hoping that we would actually even have shows like this. All that seemed like an impossibility. And now that we actually have something in all forms of media, it doesn't seem like no one appreciates it. But speaking of appreciation, the image I went with today was from her very first comic book. I think this is probably one of her most iconic poses, the first transformation of her turning into She-Hulk. There is some amazing artwork that has come out over the past years, but I will always love the traditional newsprint comic books. Something about the artwork and just the smell of the newsprint comic books in general always does something to me. I remember going to my first comic book shop where we were actually finna go get some Batman comic books because the animated series had just aired on Fox Kids, and walking into that store and just getting a whiff of all of those newsprints is something I'll never forget.
Steven, what are you doing in there?
Drugs.
I only use 2 of the Sharpie markers when doing this outline. For the general outlining, I use the extra fine point, and then I went back in with the fine point to do some of the shadow and shading. I really like using the oil markers to do the shading as opposed to using acrylic paint, because to me it's much, much faster and you still get the same result. No matter how well I think I did covering all the shadows, I always seem to miss a spot or two, so holding it up to the light is definitely going to help you identify those areas. I really liked back then how the word bubbles was just as much as the artwork and how they really played off of each other. Originally, I wanted to put all the word bubbles from this original panel into this painting. Outlining the letters were almost impossible and you wouldn't be able to read them. So I decided just to settle on the one word bubble of the Ultimate Transformation and when she got her name and was labeled the She-Hulk. A technique that was used very heavily back in the newsprint days is the cross-hatching lines. Many comic book artists use this technique to emphasize shadows, but they also use this to emphasize dramatic effects on the page. Now that everything is outlined and filled in, it's time to move on to my favorite step, and you guys know, which is painting. So the original green that I had on hand was just way too light for this, so I figured I'd go ahead and make my own. And yes, you can make your own green. Long before art school, it was a sandwich bag that taught me that yellow and blue make green.
Or the Gladlock bag with the yellow and blue make green seal, which means the bag is closed. Get Gladlock.
So I took those 2 colors, mixed them together, and got the exact shade that I was looking for. It's funny because who would have thunk that a Gladlock commercial would come in handy in doing artwork after all those years? I will say, no matter what brand of paint I've used, green has always been a very translucent color. I think I might have laid down 2 to 3 layers just to get the coverage to be opaque, and in some areas you'll see that still wasn't enough. After getting her skin all filled in, she was looking very lizard-like, creature of the Black Lagoon, whatever you want to call it. She wasn't looking like the Hulk. But this is what we artists call the ugly phase, where you doubt your work and doubt your skills, but you gotta keep going. Anyway, while I let those layers of her skin dry, I was ready to move on to the hair. This mossy green acrylic enamel paint was what I chose, and that was a mistake. The green highlights that I was hoping to shine through looked like someone actually threw up in her hair, so we had to erase that and start over. Luckily, I had these acrylic paints on hand. I went with the grass green from Master master's touch. And let me tell you, that made a world of difference. This was exactly the green that I was looking for. But even as you can see here, directly out of the tube, this green tube was very translucent. So I knew I was definitely going to have to lay down a couple of layers just to fill this in. The original comic book page had the shadows of our dress filled in with blue. So I just applied some here and then filled in the remaining dress with titanium white. So for the next part, I really want to try to capture that pop culture looking background. And I wasn't really sure able to pull that off with acrylic, not to mention the fact I didn't have enough acrylic paint to even try to attempt to paint the back of that. So we'll just act like this was all part of the plan. Masking off the areas that I didn't want to be painted, I used some yellow and orange spray paint to fill in the background. Looking back on this, my airbrush gun probably could have been a little bit more precise, but I still think this worked pretty well, giving me the effect that I was looking for. Trusting the process is something you definitely have to do if you're an artist. There's going to be times where what you're actually putting down on the paper or the canvas is nothing what you envision in your own mind. Sometimes it's actually even better than what you originally thought it was going to be. And I think that's what I'm having the most trouble with this phase of Marvel's fans. A lot of them are not trusting the process. They're dumping on how bad they say phase 4 is, not knowing that all of this is going to be leading up to something that I think in the very end is going to be a great payoff, but it's just going to take some time to get there. I think if we spend less time trying to pick apart everything we hate about this current run of Marvel and appreciate everything that they have done and what we actually have as fans in front of us, this whole experience can be much more enjoyable for everybody. And now we've come to the part that I know you guys always appreciate, the flip. Here is the savage, sensational She-Hulk. Let me know what you guys think. Final product all done. Looks like it's pulled right from a page of a comic book. Well, technically it was. But we have everybody's favorite green skin, fourth dimensional wall breaking lawyer, She-Hulk. Now, a lot of you who attempt glass paintings might notice that sometimes the light will actually come through your artwork. You can kind of see that here. A bit of the orange background is peeking through her green skin. In some angles, it looks really good, but in some, not so much. Personally, I don't mind that so much. It kind of looks like it's playing into her radioactive transformation. Or her gamma ray transformation. So the best way to fix that would be to take some black paint and go over She-Hulk, just staying in the frame of the character and not actually painting the background. This was my first time using acrylics and spray paint to create a glass image like this, and I wasn't sure if they were going to have some kind of weird reaction, but I'm happy to see that it actually worked. So what I mean by that is some acrylic paints by themselves, when doing glass paintings like this, will start to chip, bubble, and even fade over time. So I didn't know if adding another kind of chemical like spray paint was going to have some kind of crazy reaction. As always, guys, I'd be very interested to know what your thoughts are on this new painting and the new She-Hulk series. I got this done just in time so I can go watch the latest episode. But before you guys do, why don't you check out this video, and I'll see you guys next week with a brand new upload. Oh, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe before you go.
Feels like somebody's lighting my fire. You've helped turn me into one seriously cheesed off She-Hulk.